It is 11:30. It is the 20th day of June 2021. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I am your grumpy guide to all things gaming, Yo GGM, with some news. I normally don't do vlogs on the weekend, but this is kind of, I guess, sort of important. And I have a feeling it's going to be a topic to talk about for a lot. So let's get a jump on it. But first, as always, content warning. My videos are not appropriate for anyone. All right, so if you haven't heard the news, TSR is back. TSR is back. That's right, TSR Concrete, the one-day concrete floor coating from the best in the business, is back. TSR Concrete Coating offers epoxies, urethanes, polysugs, and polyparticle floor coating systems that are designed for garage floors and concrete applications. That's right, yes, TSR, the #1 concrete floor company in the Midwest, is back. Oh, wait, the other TSR is back. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so GGG, Gary Gygax Jr., has brought the company TSR back from the grave, resurrected it with Jeff R. Larson and some other people. We've got Larry Elmore, Jeff D., and James M. Ward are also involved. They're working on a title called Giantlands, which is supposed to be some great retro D&D kind of things. James. So what does this all mean? Because there's a lot of confusing, because TSR, as we just saw, is the name for a lot of different companies, including in our neck of the woods. TSR, of course, represents Tactical Studies Rules, which was the company co-created by Gygax and Don Kane, which launched Dungeons and Dragons originally back around 1974, when bought up by WTC sometime in the 90s, and who went on to revive D&D and stuff. So there is some confusion to the TSR trademark, which is part of the whole thing. I don't know how much longer I'm going to push the TSR concrete flooring joke. Probably as far as I can, knowing me. So the TSR trademark expired sometime around 2004, which means even though WOTC bought TSR sometime in the 90s, they changed the name, as we know, to Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, blah, 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 which meant the TSR name was still floating around from sometimes in the 90s to 2004, just sort of in that nebulous, weird zone of trademark stock thingies that, people far smarter than I understand, but, doesn't really give us any direct idea what happened to the trademark. I assume some aspect of Wizards of the Coast was sort of keeping their fingers on it so nobody else could use it, kind of like, the whole Captain Marvel thing with Marvel and DC. That's a different story, but yeah. And then they just sort of let it expire in 2004, which you can let a trademark expire. Trademarks are held in perpetuity by the company, the powers that control things like trademarks and things like that. But you can willingly let the trademark go, or you can just stop paying for it, and then the name just kind of goes up into that nebulous world of wherever these things go, which means somebody else could buy that name and reuse it, which apparently is what happened sometime in 2011. Jason Elliott acquired the expired TSR sometime in 2011 and launched Gygax magazine with D&D co-creator Gygax's son, Luke and Ernie, who are both involved with TSR alumnus Tim Kask. The magazine was canceled a few years ago as Luke and Ernie withdrew after the trademark dispute with Gail Gygax, Gary Gygax's wife. That's a whole other kettle of fish. Again, because I don't know enough about it, because I guess at some point in time Gail said, whatever, it's not important. Now, that company is still an operational company called TSR Games, which produces the Top Secret RPG. So the trademark that is currently held by Gygax, and that company is still an operational company called TSR Games that apparently does something with Top Secret RPG. I didn't know Top Secret was still a thing. I guess it is, or it's probably one of those things where they control the product, so that means nobody else can control the product. It's kind of like the Palladium thing and the people who used to have the rights to villains and vigilantes thing. And it's all very confusing and complicated and involves lawyers and people far smarter than me. And it's a weird, prickly world. The world of copyrights and trademarks and corporates and who controls what and when you can and what names you can and cannot use. But it's very confusing. But we now have a press release dated June 15th and a Facebook page launch which has a new version of the old logo, but now it's calling itself TSR Games, with a new image created by Larry Elmo and Steve Inc. and Stephen E. Deinhardt. If I'm saying any of these names wrong, I apologize. Steve Inc., I-N-C-E, and Stephen E. Deinhardt, D-I-N-E-H-A-R-T. I'm pretty sure I said Larry's name right. For our first official product, Giantlands. One word, Giantlands. We then have this drawing that I guess Larry did of a weird spiky lizard thing fighting a barbarian in a strange-looking dragon cat thing in sort of a fantasy setting. I'll post it. Tactical Studies Rules, which was founded in 1973, is now back. Ernest G. Gygax is the executive person. Executive Vice President Jeff R. Lawson is the CEO, and Stephen R. Deinhardt is the other CEO. And, of course, we have Elmore and other people involved in it. So the Facebook page contains a bunch of info about the people involved. The new TSR's first product is called Giantlands, a science fantasy tabletop RPG, and an associated theme park. What? Are they building a D&D theme park? Well, I mean, I know they were building a D&D museum out there in... Lake Geneva. So we have the classic lines of products at TSR Museum Dungeon Hobby Shop, which is a hobby shop that Gygax Jr. is associated with, and he's got his, Dungeon Hobby Shop, Dungeon Memorial Tomb stuff that he's done, and they're bringing a new bunch of stuff out together under the TSR logo. So how is the TSR Games different than TSR Games? And there's two separate companies that are using it. They do look slightly different in how they're doing the lettering. And I guess in the legalese of how this works, there are enough points of differences that they can have two companies called the same name. Actually, you can have hundreds of companies called TSR. Thus, we have TSR Concrete Flooring, the number one concrete flooring business in the Midwest. Because one is TSR and one is TSR.games. And as far as if you break copyright trademark down to its bare minimum and ignore all the other weird stuff that I can't even possibly try to explain, and I've had to file for copyrights, bare minimum, there has to be at least, it used to be 3 points of difference. I'm not even sure if it's that many anymore. It could now be 2 or even less. But in order to bare minimum be considered different enough, there has to be at least 3 things that are different. So all right, what do I get? So here we go. This one's pink. This one's yellow. That's 1 point of difference. I can still, so I can't use the name yet. All right, this one's pink and this one's yellow. This one's got a hashtag going to the side. This one's got a hashtag going up and down. That's 2 points of difference. I still can't use it. It's got to be one more point of difference. All right, so now we got pink, yellow, hashtag going to the side, hashtag going up and down, circle above the hashtag, circle next to the hashtag. They're still basically the same thing, but as far as the powers that be that control trademarks and copyrights are concerned, there are enough points of difference that these are, in fact, two separate entities. And that's basically, from my limited understanding, bare minimum, and I assure you there's way more involved than that, but bare minimum, there has to be at least 3 points of difference. So TSR that produces Top Secret, and TSR that's producing Giantlands, and I guess eventually all the stuff that has been previously released by Gygax Jr. under the Hobby Shop Dungeon trademark. Even though they have the same name and the logo looks basically the same, there are enough points of difference that they can both call themselves TSR. And as long as TSR Games doesn't try and produce Top Secret, they really have no points of contention with TSR Games. And yeah, again, way too much confusing to even try and explain. But basically, the good news is, I guess, Ernie Gygax, James Ward, Larry Elmore, a couple other people who, were directly or indirectly involved with the very beginnings of our hobby, and Gary and those guys have got to. I don't know if Luke Gygax is associated with or not, they're trying to get a museum built. They have a hobby shop, the Dungeon Hobby Shop, and now they have reincorporated and recreated TSR Games, and they're trying to recapture that classic pre-Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons that the OSR is constantly trying to sort of recreate. How will this affect the OSR? Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it an interesting thing? Will there be some type of fallout and lots of stuff to talk about going forward because this is happening this weekend? Oh, yes. And it gives us something to talk about that isn't Wizards of the Coast / Critical Role / Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So there alone, that's good enough for me, because now we can talk about this. And I can hopelessly fail at trying to explain to you how copyright works. Like, why is there 2 Spider-Mans? Why is there 37 Captain Marvels? Okay, so there we go. There's the story. It's newsworthy. Congratulations to Gygax Jr. and James Ward for getting the company started. Already having product available, the Giantlands theme park? I don't know that part of the world well enough to know if there's room for a theme park, but if they have the land, and they can build a Dungeons and Dragons theme park. I guess they can't, the TSR theme park, they can't call it Dungeons and Dragons. For emergencies, sure, why not? I mean, there's an unofficial World of Warcraft amusement park out there in China, Korea, so why not a Giantlands TSR theme park? I mean, all it really has to do is have a vaguely fantasy-themed merry-go-round, and it's a theme park, right? I mean, what defines a theme park? 1 or 2 things. I mean, there's a spa theme park in Japan. It's basically just a bunch of spas that are themed, but it's not like they have the roller coaster or anything. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. It'll be interesting to see what this means for the Dungeons and Dragons Museum. It'll be interesting to see how this relates to the previous stuff that Ernie Gary Gygax has put out through the dungeon place, like the Memorial Tomb and a couple other things. What Luke Gygax's involvement is, what their plans are for Giantlands, how it's going to affect the OSR, how it's going to affect 5th edition, what it's going to mean with the anniversary coming up. It's all opening new doors of topics we can discuss. Or we can just go back to talking about TSR Concrete, the #1 concrete company in the Midwest. If this is a topic that you're interested in and want to hear more about, comment down below. If you never want to hear me talk about this topic ever again, comment down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Help me hit 500 subs by August 4th, and we will do something crazy. Till next time, I am your grumpy guide to all things gaming. Talk to you soon, Steve.